Chair, I must say I come as an unhappy witness today. Because I thought, I even asked the team over the weekend, why am I being called? Because the last time the chairperson summarized the discussion on this matter.
Yes.
Was that I'll quickly sort out my affidavit.
Yes.
So that we can deal with these issues in a full context.
Yes. Especially
in the fact that, Chair, I stated very clearly we are working on Mr. Oleman's report, which I've said I do not accept, Chair. And I think it shouldn't even be before the commission unless if he had filed the proper affidavit. Because you see, it can be that some of us file affidavits under oath, and then somebody files a report, attaches reports and other things. There's a context, Chair, and I think you probably allow me before we go to the specifics of the documents, because I think so that the Chair can appreciate why I'm aggrieved and the unfairness. But I've also said, Chair, because I've been cooperating with the Commission and the team, I do not want to bring administrative issues here.
Okay.
We'll continue dealing with them in the background. Yes, so that the focus on the hearings must be on the hearings.
Be on the real
so
issues,
I'm not going to stop it, Chair, but I think at some stage before we even go to the details, I don't know when, but maybe Mr. Soni wants to finish the Parkwood. And then I indicate, particularly because I think, Chair, the section on my affidavit on properties, which I think I've worked with the team, it was done, and of course it has not been before the commission as yet, because I think that as we discuss the issues of properties, my affidavit is not here. We are discussing these issues. I want the part of my affidavit, Chair, to read it out. It's not long, so that we can then we can deal with this issue in totality, Chair. So that would be my request, Chair. I don't know at what point you'll allow me, but that's my request, Chair.
Well, let me say this, Mr. Montana. Last week, we adjourned on the basis on which we adjourned. But for some time, I've been trying to allocate dates to different witnesses, and there are limited days available because we're trying to finish all oral evidence by end of May. So when I spoke to the legal team and said they should try and check whether you could make today, it was within that context.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
But so that is the one point. The second point is that we know that when we parted last time, it was on the part of the basis was that it would be desirable to have something in writing from you that deals with the issue of properties. And you do say that your affidavit has a section that deals with that, and that you would like. Now, even if your affidavit is not before the commission as yet, if that section can be dealt with as a standalone, I don't see a problem. And assuming that the problem with annexures doesn't affect it. Now, of course, I don't know whether it does or it doesn't. Mr. Soni, where have you got, would you like to say something about that?
Chairperson, I have read Mr. Montana's affidavit. And I'm just setting out what the difference is between the evidence that is intended to be led and what is contained in Mr. Montana's affidavit. Mr. Montana can comment after I have given my what my submission is in regard to those issues. Mr. Montana in his affidavit deals with all the properties that he owns, and they are, if my memory serves me correctly, about 8 properties.
8.
8.
Yeah.
We deal with only 4 properties. These are the 4 properties that in some way or the other, based on the documents that we have, Mr. Montana and Mr. van der Walt were involved. That's all we intend, that's the only evidence we intend producing to you, Chairperson. Now, we do not accept that Mr. Montana's evidence on the other properties is relevant to the terms of reference of the Commission, because there is no connection between Mr. van der Walt and Mr. Montana and those properties. So that's the first point of departure. The second point of departure is that Mr. Montana, in his affidavit, doesn't deal with the issues as they are set out in the annexures to Mr. Ollerman's affidavit. And once we get past that issue, Chairperson, in other words, if, for example, there is, as there is, an agreement, an offer to purchase and an acceptance of the offer, and therefore an agreement to purchase the property or to sell the property. That is a matter that we would like Mr. Montana to confirm, and in respect of each of the properties we have that. We also have the background to how those agreements arose, and also the method of payment for those properties. Now, those are the facts that we submit before you. What inferences are to be drawn from those facts? What conclusions one would draw from them? Whether there is anything improper, whether there is anything irregular, is an entirely separate matter. But we can't reach that either in respect of what Mr. Montana says or what we say, unless there is agreement on those basic facts. And so the purpose was, although we don't have Mr. Montana's affidavit, the purpose was, the purpose is just to get the facts before you when Mr. Montana wants to comment on what inferences to be drawn from them, then we can deal with that which is contained in his act.
Well, I got the impression when last week Mr. Montana talked about the issue of properties that he may be seeking to say his involvement in the properties that you are focusing on should be seen in the context, should be seen in a wider context of his involvement even in other properties.
Yes.
That's the impression I got, that he is saying, well, maybe if you look at those particular properties, you might get certain impressions, but there's a wider picture that should be taken into account. And when you take into account the wider picture, you may take a different view. Or that I thought that is what he might be wishing to say. So I guess that one will only take a view when one either reads or hears what he has to say about the other properties, how they come into the picture. But in terms of him reading into the record that section of his affidavit that deals with properties subject to the issue of relevance, you don't have a problem.
No,
Yeah.
not at all, Chairperson.
Yeah,
Not at all.
So no, that's fine. Then the next thing is just the right time to do that.
Yes.
Yeah. From your side, is there a particular time that you would submit should be the right time?
Chairperson, I really do not have a problem with when it's to be done. I don't want to be unfair to Mr. Montana.
Yeah.
If it's to
Yeah.
be done at the outset, but there
Yeah.
must be one condition to it, Chairperson.
Yeah.
That after Mr. Montana sets out what he says are
The bigger picture.
the bigger picture, what he says is the bigger picture, then he must answer the questions that are posed in relation to those documents.
No, he's here to do that. He's here to do that, yeah. Mr. Montana, you are here to do that.
Chair, I've seen previously these documents.
Yeah,
And I'm here, Chair.
yeah.
I would have asked that, I would have asked for another month to study the document, to consult. I'm here, Mr. Soni.
Yeah.
I'll answer, but Chair, I think, let me deal with 3 issues, small issues. You see, the commission owes me an apology, Chair. In fact, if I didn't respect the chair and the commission, I would have actually refused. Mr. Soni and Mr. Oleman stood, and you asked an important question. I think it was on the 2nd of July, Chair, I can't recall. You wanted to clarify how many properties and how much. Chair, the response from Mr. Soni at that time was that Mr. Montana, he corrected the chair and said, Mr. Montana bought properties for 36 million. And that is why, Chair, the process we are going to follow, because that is not correct. Okay? And that is why in my affidavit, I deal with these property dealings, Chair, because they are not illegitimate, they are not unlawful. Why Mr. Soni set it up in the manner that he does, it's basically, Chair, aimed at sustaining that false narrative. And I think it is very important, Chair, for your benefit. I'm not saying I'm going to deal with the broad picture. I'm going to deal with the specifics today, Chair.
Okay.
So I think that, for me, I raised 2 issues you called last week. The first one was, what is the source of this thing? I think the commission needs to understand why we came to this issue about houses. Secondly, and I said I want to be here to be accountable to the country. The commission should probe my dealings on anything, including on my properties. And Chair, I've written over 15 pages of my affidavit, focuses on my properties. So, I'm here to answer it, and I'm going to answer it. So I think what should happen now.
You just said you are not running away.
Chair, I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm here, and I think Mr. Soni can grill me the whole day. I'm here, Chair. But I think it would be fair, considering what has already been put on record, that this part of my affidavit, I read it into record, and then Mr. Soni takes me out on each and every issue that he wants to do. And then the other context of how we come here, and other attached documents, I'll speak on them in the course of the testimony, Chair.
Yes, no, that's fine. As you know, I've asked Mr. Soni whether he has any particular time that he thinks would be appropriate. He says he has no particular time. So I think I'll give you a chance now to put your side of the story on the properties, basically reading into the record what is in your affidavit that is not before the commission, but it's fine to just read that part. So after you have finished, then Mr. Soni can put questions to you.
Thank you, Chair. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Soni.
Mr. Soni, you wanted to say something?
I'm going to deal with the contents of that in a moment.
In due course.
In due course.
No, that's fine.
But what I would just like from Mr. Montana is, I don't know whether the affidavit he submitted earlier is the same affidavit, because I understand that he has drawn up a new affidavit. I'm not raising technicalities. I just don't want there to be a disjuncture between what he reads into the record and the affidavit that may become part of the Commission's
Actually, you
proceeding.
know what we could do? Now, I remember even our discussion last time, because I had said it would be better if one has read what you are going to say before we start. It makes things easier. Is it not possible that for present purposes, we could sort of uplift from his affidavit that section that deals with the properties, and then maybe we could adjourn. Let me read it, Mr. Son. You can get a chance to read it, and then when we come back, then he reads it into the record or whatever. But at least we know what he has to say. Yeah, is it fine if we do it that way?
No, I'm happy, Chair. I think that will be the right way. Thank
Yes,
you.
and that section could, because it's a standalone, could even be an exhibit on its own. It could be admitted as an exhibit, on its own. Shall we just adjourn so that that can be done? How long would that take to do?
Is this the same as I'm asking?
No, sir, but I've got it, Chair. I've got it here.
You've got
so I'll
it
give
here.
it to the team to make copies quickly.
Okay, but it's a standalone.
It's a standalone, Chair.
Standalone. Okay. Yeah. Then let me adjourn, and then copies can be made.
Yes.
It's 15 pages. You said. It's 15 pages.
Chair, I think it's about 15 pages. I think it's page 311 to page. Yeah, I think it's about 15 pages, Chair. I think to page 327. It's not a lot, Chair.
Okay, it might. I don't know.
But it certainly would expedite matters.
Yes, it will expedite matters. Yes. So let's see. Once I'm done, I'll let you know. That might take about maybe 30, 40 minutes. I'm not sure. Depends on how fast one can read. But let's try that.
As you please.
So let me adjourn, and the copies can be made. Then I'll be given a copy. I'll start reading, and then we can resume after that.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, we adjourn.
We are ready, Chairperson.
Okay, all right. Let's continue then. Well, I saw in the statement, Mr. Montana, that there is a reference to maybe one or two annexures, I'm not sure. Are those annexures available?
Yes, Chair, they are available. Just to explain, as discussed with Mr. Soni. Chair, you'll see I've given, I thought I had the commissioned affidavit, but it will be here by lunchtime, Chair. So I gave a copy so that we can proceed, but it's exactly the same as you have. The annexures are also available, so we'll make those available, and we've agreed with Mr. Soni that over and above that, we'll pull out this section with the annexures so that I hand them to the commission, so that we
Yes.
know that we are done with this particular matter. Chair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Soni?
As you please, it seems as if the annexes are not here at the moment, but Mr. Montana
Will
will make
supply
them
them.
available at lunchtime or about
Yeah,
it.
okay, all right. Okay, let's continue then.
Mr. Montana,
Mr. Montana, you can then read into the record your
Thank you, Chair.
your statement.
Thank you, Chair. I think I really appreciate, Chair, and I think this matter has been there not only before this commission but throughout the country, to the nation about these properties and everything, and that is why I wanted to put that on record before, Chair. And you will see that initially, Mr. Soni mentioned that I'm talking about all my properties.
Yeah.
And there's 4, Chair. But this statement explains, Chair, you see, it explains how actually the entire 7 properties, which I used to have, Chair, I don't have them today. I think it's very important that those properties, how they finance all the other properties that we're referring to. And I think it's very important because it's at the heart of what we do, Chair. You will
Yes.
see that, Chair, it's the heading is my property dealings.
Maybe, Mr. Soni, we should admit this as an exhibit.
as you please, Chairperson.
Do you have a suggestion what exhibit it should be?
Mr.
I
Chair,
think we should, I'm going to write on mine. I'll write, I'll simply write Mr. Montana's version on the properties as read into the record today.
I think that it will be admitted after I've submitted with the affidavit at lunchtime, Chair.
And no, we can admit it now because
No, okay.
it's a standalone,
Okay.
and then the annexures can come later. Mr. Montana's version on the properties as read into the record on 10 May 2021. And then what exhibit should we make this to be,
Chairperson, I was just going to make a suggestion that it would be SS 18B because it's a response to Mr. Ollerman's.
Exhibit SS18B. Capital letter B or small letter B?
We can make it small letter B, Chairperson.
Small letter. You confirm, Mr. Montana, that this is your version, this document contains your version on the properties, and that its contents are true and correct.
Yes, I do, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. This document will therefore be admitted as an exhibit and will be marked as exhibit SS18B, small letter B.
As you please.
Okay, all right. Okay, you can go ahead then, Mr. Montana.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, let me, the heading to the document, to that document you just admitted, is my property dealings. Chair, it says there's an allegation that Montana received gratification in the form of properties purchased on his behalf by Siangena Technologies. In its so-called preliminary report on PRASA, the Commission's investigator, Clint Oleman, and evidence leader advocate Vasonis told the chairperson of the Commission, DCJ Zondo, that and I quote, Montana purchased properties of over 36 million within a year. This is false. Siangena Technologies or Rian van der Walt did not purchase any property for me. There are 4 properties mentioned in Mr. Oleman's report. 1 in Rose Street, Waterkloof in Pretoria, 2 adjacent properties in Brook Lane, and another in Empire Road, Sandhurst. These were purchased by and are owned by Precise Trade, a company in which Rian van der Walt is a sole shareholder and director. I reject with contempt the suggestion these properties belong to me. There were 7 properties in my name. I acquired 3 of the properties before I joined PRASA in 1998, 2004, and 2005. And I acquired 4 when I was in the employ of PRASA. I've since disposed of 4 properties over the years. There was no Rian van der Walt or Siangena Technologies when I bought any of these properties. I use my properties to generate profits or as equity in any property development where I became partner. I have the full right to grow my property portfolio and elected to partner with Rian van der Walt in this regard. My relationship with Rian van der Walt was about board. It was a partnership about mobilizing common resources to develop properties and make money. The partnerships were about identifying opportunities in the property sector with a view to enter into joint venture partnership agreements for purposes of development and ultimately share in the profits in each of the developments. There is nothing irregular or unlawful about this. Mr. van der Walt was not a director or an employee of Siangena Technologies, had not done work for PRASA, nor has he been involved with PRASA tenders awarded to Siangena Technologies. There was no conflict of interest. There was no case of a conflict of interest. Unfortunately, the partnership Rian van der Walt and I were pursuing did not materialize and ended on 29th October 2015. A copy of an email from Rian van der Walt terminating our relationship is attached here to mark the TLM 1160. And I think that's what we'll provide there in the course of that. It will show that in our communication that we talk about that partnership or joint ventures. There is a desperate attempt to present the partnership Rian van der Walt and I were pursuing as a secret and link this to the tenders awarded to Siangena Technologies. This is simply not true. In his preliminary report presented to the Commission, Mr. Oleman attempts to present financial or bank statements of Lobsa van der Walt Incorporated, managed by Rian van der Walt, as if these belong to Precise Trade, and by extension, to my relationship with Rian van der Walt. So, Chair, whatever transactions that took place between Lobsa van der Walt Incorporated and TMM are not known to me and have nothing to do with me. I had dealings with Precise Trade, which had nothing to do with TMM or the properties which Lobsa van der Walt Incorporated was managing. This was confirmed by Robert, I think Nichtling is his name, from Lobsa van der Walt attorneys during his testimony here. He seemed aggrieved, though, about the fact that Rian van der Walt may have done other business outside the law firm, and the other partners did not know. Again, this fight among the partners had nothing to do with me. The false information about gratification was first leaked to the journalist, Mr. Peter Louis Mybeck, when I was still at PRASA. The journalist requested an interview with me on the various properties I owned at the time. The initial allegation was that the property I owned in 10 Newport Parkwood, Johannesburg, was bought for me by Alstom, the lead company in the Gibela Rail Consortium, which won the 53 billion PRASA Rolling Stock Fleet Renewal Program tender in 2012. Mr. Mybeck had already contacted some members of the Gibela Consortium to interview them about the said property. I granted Mr. Mybeck an interview in April 2015. I brought to the office all my files of the properties containing bank approvals and monthly repayments of the bond facilities. I gave Mr. Mybeck the time in my office, he said that, to read these documents in the presence of the PRASA spokesperson, Mr. Moffat Mufokeng. So we allowed him to peruse the files. It became clear to Mr. Mybeck that he was that he was on a goose chase to nowhere, and the files indicated the property in question was acquired by me in 2008 and financed by Absa Bank. So 2008, there was also no tender, Chair, for this rolling stock. So there was no Alstom involved in that. When the opportunity presented itself for Mr. Mybeck to interview me, he changed his tune. It was no longer about properties. Instead, the interview focused on the rolling stock fleet renewal program, RSFRP, and he wanted clarity on the different players in this particular transaction. He proceeded to write a piece in the Report Sunday newspaper about the role players and trying to link these various individuals to former President Jacob Zuma. I had issued, and Chair, I'm going to build at a later stage when I come back with my affidavit, how this entire thing was actually set as to pursue a former president. I'll deal with that at a later. So his article, he interviewed me about the houses and said, Alstom bought you a house. But when he wrote and he realized, he said, no, it's financed by the bank. There it is, the Parkwood property that Mr. If Sony will ask me about. He found that that property is actually financed by the bank. And then he interviewed me about who are these different players. I explained to him, and he went to write an article for Report newspaper, as well as the City Press, I remember. And that's when they tried to drag the name of former President Zuma in all of this. Thing is big, Chair. I'll deal with it at the right time. I had issued a statement on February 2016, rejecting the allegations that I benefited corruptly through my properties. And I attach here to a copy of my statement marked TLM 161. And Chair, I think that would be another annexure that we'll provide here. As recent as 30 January 2018, I've rejected these allegations again in my testimony before the parliamentary inquiry into governance at ESCOM. I'm rejecting the false information and conclusion being made by Clint Oleman claiming that I bought properties to the value of over 30 million. I can confirm, Chair, that my own properties were financed by Absa through a facility called the Private One Bank Account, a facility to the tune of 10.5 million rands. I attach here to a copy of the Absa Private One Bank facility marked TLM 162. And I think that is another annexure, Chair, that we'll provide to the Commission. My monthly repayments for the facility at the time was 95,973. A copy of the email from ABSA calculating the repayments of and the terms of the facilities attached here to mark TLM 163. The specific details of the properties covered by the Private One facility, Chair, are as follows. F 178 Saxon World, Johannesburg, mortgage bond in the capital amount of 4,675,000. F 359 Parkwood, Johannesburg, and this is the one that has been highlighted, Chair, that I sold it. Mortgage bond in the capital amount of 2 million. Remainder extent of 1 F161 Waterkloof, Pretoria. First continuing covering mortgage bond in the capital amount of 1,750,000 rand. Remainder extent of F161 Waterkloof, Pretoria. Second continuing covering mortgage bond in the capital amount of 270,000. So this was when I was doing improvements on the properties. And of course, so you can see for the same property, there's a third continuing coverage bond in the capital amount of 200,000 rands. F1242 Waterkloof, Pretoria, first continuing covering mortgage bond of 2,160,000. And Chair, I proceed. I say I sold one of the properties in Waterkloof, which reduced the principal debt of the facility to 8.3 million. The monthly repayments were accordingly reduced to 63,593. A copy of the ABSA letter is attached here to marked TLM 164. In addition to the 4 properties, I had acquired in 1998 another property in Mamelodi, Pretoria, with a mortgage bond from National Bank. I think the amount was, didn't include the amount there, but it was 116,000, Chair. I later sold 4 of the properties and used the proceeds to settle debts and to invest in other properties. And I think, Chair, this is very important because Mr. Sonia said, let's focus on the 4. I want to show the commission how when I sold, I got involved in the 4 properties that he mentioned. So in each of these, I've used my own money, Chair, from the sale of other properties that I've developed. I'd relied on the properties which I owned and the private one facility that Upside extended to me to either buy properties or enter into partnerships or joint ventures to unlock value from properties I owned or to invest in new developments. I'd also lost money in some of these when some of the developments did not materialize or were abandoned. So, Chair, it has been made, the statement has been made that I got involved in all of those things. I didn't have a cent to buy, and that's so false, Chair. Unfortunately, ABSA could no longer extend the private one facility further, and it insisted that I had to dispose of or rent out some of the properties to remain within the affordability set by the bank before any financing future financing could be considered. I therefore had to sell some of the properties to meet the bank's requirements to generate cash or pay for my stake in the various development agreements I had intended to partake. The false allegations about gratification emanates from the affidavits of Paul O'Sullivan and Philemon Mamabulo, who was doing some, Philemon Mamabulo was doing some investigative work on behalf of Popo Molefe and Wertzmann's attorneys. I provide below further details of each of the 7 properties I owned. And Chair, that's where I want to then explain the sale of this paid for this, which I think these Oleman reports fail to understand. Chair, let me start with the first one. In 2016, Mr. Mybeck had trespassed on one of my properties, 333 Main Street, Waterkloof, Pretoria, claiming he was investigating corruption in the manner in which I had acquired this property. The said property was purchased in December 2004 when I relocated from Cape Town to start a new job as Deputy Director General in the Department of Transport. Now, Chair, I mentioned that because it's very important. I only started at PRASA in 2006. The bank financed this property in 2004. But I'm being accused that I bought it from corrupt proceeds from PRASA, when I was not even working for PRASA at that time, Chair. So it's very important that I put that on record. The property, again, was financed by ABSA, and I think I mentioned the details of how the amount of the bond. I developed the property into a modern property in the heart of Waterkloof. It is today being used as an embassy after I'd sold the Chair for about 8.5 million rands. 8.55 million rands in late 2016. The bond cancellation was in the region of the 2.2 million, and the rest of the proceeds were invested into another property in Victoria Street in Waterkloof. So, Chair, so this property I bought in 2004, developed it, I was not working for PRASA, and sold it in 2016. Yet the journalist came into the house. I think there was a story that I hit him with a brick or something like that. It was in the newspapers. But Chair, I'm an African man. And do as he wish. I'll never allow that. I was saying, Mr. Soni, that as an African man, I'll not allow a man to trespass at my father's house and do as he wishes. Mr. Mybeck was trying to do, Chair. He trespassed. He was there inside my yard. And this property, as you can see, I bought it before I worked for PRASA, Chair. So that is the first issue, Chair. Then there's another property, 1242 Waterkloof, Chair. This property was purchased in 2005. And again, I was not working for PRASA, Chair. This was financed by the bank through the very same private one bank facility. Chair, there are important 2 points. Let me finish reading it, but there are 2 important points I want to highlight for the Chair. I had done major renovations and extensions to the property. The property was valued at 8.5 million rands in 2013. However, the property was sold for 2,750 million to a family that owned one of the properties purchased by Rian van der Walt in Brooklyn. So when you talk about the 2 Brooklyn adjacent properties, Chair, you'll see I'll explain this point. So it relates to the second property that the other part of the 4, that Mr. Soni. I want to demonstrate, Chair, to you that in each and every property dealings I got involved, I owned a house. I either sold or put it into a scheme. I taken the risk of letting go of a property at a hugely discounted price. This was to facilitate for the consolidation of the properties and development in the future. The development would have involved Precise Trade and myself. Precise Trade is a company that is owned by Rian van der Walt, Chair. So here's this family, Chair. Why I bought, and these properties are in the same street, by the way, Chair, in Waterkloof. When I was Deputy Director General in the Department of Transport, I was staying in a house. My house was attacked by warlords or Inkabi from the taxi industry, because one of the programs I was running was a taxi recapitalization program. And the state security, National Intelligence at that time agency, came and did a security assessment and said, look, your property is actually sitting in the place where it's easy that you could be attacked, because it's closer to a shopping center. Someone can monitor movements from there. They urged that I move. So I didn't sell the property, but I moved, Chair. Same street further away from there. This is the property that I bought. And I developed it. And you can see, Chair, I bought it before I worked for PRASA in 2005. So the first one, 2004, the second one is 2005. I developed it, Chair. But its disposal is very important because it relates to the two properties that Rian purchased, Chair, as it were. And these are not in Oleman's report, Chair, because those details were left out. If I were being interviewed, those details would have emerged, and this report would not have come before the commission, because they would have seen that this man had put his money into all these developments, Chair. So effectively, after that transaction and the entire thing was abandoned, I've lost approximately, Chair, if we look at the value of the properties, about 5.7 million rands when I prepared for that partnership. Now there's ERF 178 Saxon World, Chair. This property was purchased in 2008. I was working for PRASA. Again, it was financed by the bank for 4.6 million rands. And I just recently sold it, Chair, to settle the very same facility with ABSA, and to settle also my debt with the South African Revenue Services. Now F359 Parkwood, Chair. The property was purchased in 2008. Chair, I paid 2 million for it. It was financed by the bank from the very same facility. And it was a complete wreck, Chair. I still have pictures of then and now. I bought the property because I've been dealing with property, Chair. I had rebuilt the property and then turned it into a modern house. I sold it for 6.8 million to Rian van der Walt in 2013, Chair. Mr. Louis Merbeck claimed in an article, and this he gets it from the affidavit of the 22-page affidavit of Mr. Paul O'Sullivan, that according to neighbors in Parkwood, the property should have been sold for 4.8 million. I had initially asked for 7.2 million, but Rian van der Walt offered me 6.8 million rands for the property, which I accepted. The valuation of 3 million that has been bandied about, Chair, is not known to me and did not relate to the price of the property at the time of the sale. It's been brought here as part of the Oleman's report, Chair, that the property was valued. It's false, Chair. There's not such a thing. This is noise about the price of the property. The noise about the property of the price of the property did not come from neighbors, as claimed by Merbeck in this article, but it came from Mr. Paul O'Sullivan's 22-page affidavit. And Chair, I want to challenge the neighbors. I think this commission, if it's true to what Mr. Oleman is saying, take the statement from the neighbor. He put it under oath, and we cross-examine the neighbor as well to say, do you believe it? Have you seen Mr. Montana's house? Have you lived in that particular house? Mr. Sony raised the issue that Mr. Saki Zamkaka, who was one of the CEO, lived in the house, Chair. And it's true, he lived in my house, in the house, Chair. But the insinuation is that Mr. Zamkaka lived in that house because he was involved in a corrupt scheme. That's not true, Chair. The house was a wreck. I fixed it. I left it actually unoccupied. It was vandalized. I fixed it, and Mr. Zamklaka at some stage, for his own family reasons, which I cannot deal with it, he was forced to live in the city of Johannesburg. And I said to him, my brother, the gangsters in the city of Johannesburg are going to kill you. I've got a house. You can live there rent-free for a while. And when I sold the house to Mr. Rian van der Walt, they then agreed that he can rent the property. I don't know how much he was paying and all of those. But I put him there because when I left it empty, so it was vandalized. I fixed it again at a huge cost, Chair. And then he lived there. Later I sold the property, Chair, as it were. Now, Chair, you can see, I want to explain the 6.8 million, how it was spent. But let me finish reading these two paragraphs first. The journalist, and that is Mr. Maybeck, and the so-called neighbors did not have details of the investment I'd made and had not been inside the house. Into the house. They did not see the work which had been done, the quality of finishes or items that had been installed, yet they wanted to determine the price for from my property. The same journalists or investigators did not rely on any independent valuation, Chair, to say you must sell it for 5 million or 3 million. This thing is just arbitrary. We are here to discuss the price of a house that people did not even know how I bought it, what were the developments and all of those things. Mr. Maybeck started writing about the new owner, Mr. van der Walt, and that he had represented Mr. Mario Ferreira in some deal as an attorney. Therefore, we are guilty by association, Chair. It's not the issue of corruption here. It's that because Lucky works with Rian van der Walt, and van der Walt was a director in another firm, and that firm did something for Mr. Ferreira's company, TMM. Therefore, we are guilty. That is at the heart of this thing, Chair. But I'll explain the underlying reasons why it is done. Let me go to ERF 161, Chair. This property was purchased for 2.2 million cash from the proceeds of the sale of the Parkwood property. Okay? Now, this is another property, Chair, in Waterkloof. It was behind...
It's 2.25,
2.50. 2.25, Chair.
Yeah.
Now, Chair, just for you to make the connection, you can see that there's remaining extent of ERF 161 Waterkloof, and then there's ERF 161 Waterkloof. You can see these are two properties. So I own the properties in front. So the property has been subdivided. So when I sold Parkwood property, Chair, I then said, because the Rian was buying the price, I said, no, I want part of that money to be put into that property. So you'll see that when you look at my bank accounts, there's no flow from the payments of the 6.8 to me, because the money primarily went to three places. Didn't come into my account. And I thought the investigators, Chair, would ask themselves that first question. And they didn't, because they were not interested in the truth. 6.8, the first payment, Chair, went to cancel the bond of 2 million. So that happened, was done by Ria to ABSA for the Parkwood property after it was transferred in his name. The second 2 million, Chair, it went to the Hullingham property. You see, the Hullingham is one of the four, Chair. So after I've sold in Parkwood and I found the property in Hullingham, I paid the first deposit. You'll see that in the offer to sale, there's a deposit of 2 million. That's paid by me, Chair. Mr. Oleman, Mr. Sony have been saying here, he didn't have money to pay. Not true, Chair. The 2 million deposit was paid by me. It's money, it's proceeds from the sale of a Parkwood property that was financed by ABSA. And Chair, you see, this shows the importance of why the people should do proper investigations. They were here to damage my name, to make sure that the whole country is told Montana is involved in corrupt properties. Okay? So I paid the 2 million, and then the remainder, Chair, of that 6.8, part of it, there's 2 million, 2 million 4, so there was 4.8 and the 2.25 was paid by Rian on my behalf, Chair, from the proceeds of the sale. Okay? So, Chair, the story that Parkwood was expensive, that I sold it above thing, is false. Unless if you get a quantity survey and say, calculate all the cost and then make a market value, a determination of the market value, and then and do that, and then decide it's sold. But for me, the bottom line is that there's not single transaction are being involved where my money was not involved. Okay. And I think that when I was sitting with anger, Chair, when I listened to this report being tabled here. And you can see that there was no interest in the truth except to damage my reputation. That is corrupt. He gave Siangena contracts so that he can get properties. It's so false, Chair. Now, Chair, let me go to 12 Montrose Hurlingham is the one that I said the 2 million rand, Chair, was deposited. And let me explain, Chair. You'll see that in the annexures that will come, I've got an agreement, what you call a joint venture agreement with a company called Midtown Brace. You remember last week, Chair, I insisted that you read the affidavit deposed by Andre Wagner. The commission said it is irrelevant. Okay? Why? Because the commission's investigators were trying to deny the fact that I put the first 2 million rands and I've entered into a transaction, into a deal, a development for this property, because we had wanted to build 15 luxury units in the heart of Sandhurst. And each one of them, Chair, we're going to sell it for 18 million according to the plan that we had in 2015. So when you get involved in property, Chair, you're not doing it for charity. So these investigators at the commission believe that because I'm the CEO of PRASA, I'm not entitled to get involved in any other development because these properties don't conflict with PRASA. It's got nothing to do with PRASA. It's a fact that, Chair, every Sunday, Chair, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do parties. I'm a CEO, I get this amount of money, and I get involved in property. That's what I've been doing. If there's one activity I do, in my spare time, I go, I look for empty land. That's what I do. There's nothing corrupt. There's nothing unlawful. And, Chair, I will not even apologize to anyone. Because if we don't get involved in property as Africans, I'm being victimized here. That you shouldn't get involved in property. You're stolen. But yet the facts about the transactions are deliberately being ignored by the commission. Montrose, Chair, the deposit was paid by me. And let me tell you, Chair, I didn't have the money. I didn't have the money. I had 2 million rands, and I instructed Rian that from the proceeds of Parkwood, can you pay? Because I wanted to buy time. I was not going to this property, Chair. I went to view a property in Sandhurst, and I ended up in this place by accident. It was an old house, but it was a Garden of Eden, Chair. It was a massive property. I think that it was 6,600 square meters. The garden was amazing. And I said, I want this property. That's where I met Louis Green, Chair. So the affidavit of Louis Green is not false, it's true. I went to that property. And I said, no, I'll pay a deposit of 2 million because he told me there are people who are interested, that developers. So I said, no, I'm also a developer. I'll pay a deposit of 2 million so that they can give him time. If the investigators are true to themselves and to this commission, they will also say that I was threatened because the 2 million was a non-refundable deposit I've made. They then put me on terms to say, you have now missed the deadline. You are going to forfeit the 2 million. That's when I had to find, Chair, someone to partner with me on this development. And that's how I was introduced to Mr. Andre Wagner. And Andre says, we'll put the money, we'll put 11.5 million into this, and that you will then also match our investment to 11.5. So I'd already put 2 million. I've already put the deposit money, or rather the transfer cost and everything. And then I had to raise the other money, Chair. Chair, I went to FNB in Pretoria, private one. There's a lady who financed my properties from ABSA, but had moved to FNB in Pretoria. I went, she was based in Cape Town. I went to her and said, hey, I need money. I've got this property, I've got partners, and I need to put, can you give me 10 million to put into this property? But they were very honest with me, because at that time, the stories were making, they told me I'm a politically exposed person, Chair. And that is why we had problems, because the cost of development was going to come from me. So I put that in the annexure, and I put all those details, Chair, in that particular regard. Now, Chair, the Mamelodi property, I don't want to talk much. It was in fact our family home, Chair. But because of a legal dispute, the property was auctioned. And I went to the auction. I emerged as the winner in that bid. And that this was financed by First National Bank, 416. It's a family home, even though it's in my name, but it's one of our family homes in Mamelodi, Chair. So I'm still a property owner. No one can say I left Mamelodi. I'm still there. I still have a property. I'm a ratepayer in Mamelodi, Chair. So people can't exclude me there, because I need a base in Pumakona, Lapo, Chair. Then let me deal finally, Chair, with precise trading in Brooklyn. And you see, Chair, I've been silent on two properties deliberately. I touched them at the beginning. The Waterkloof property in Rose Street and the property in Sandhurst. Despite my involvement in those properties, there's no doubt. I confirm here that Rian and I were involved in a partnership. I've been involved. What I heard at this commission, Chair, was in fact something else. Somebody, Sally, Ms. DeBier comes here, Mr. Montana came to fetch the keys. Irrelevant things. If you are not helping the commission, unless you can clarify how each of these properties were financed. But the fact that I was there, or the keys were faced, it doesn't have this commission. What is going to do? If I'm involved in partnership with Rian, surely that I will be there, Chair. And I think that the point is being missed here, because the real issue is to try to project me in this negative light. Now, Chair, let me explain to you the precise trades Brooklyn properties, because I've heard again some very interesting stories being mentioned by Mr. Oleman. Mama Bulu, the guy from PRASA who deposed of an affidavit, claims, and I've attached his affidavit, Chair, as well as O'Sullivan's affidavit. I've attached both of them, Chair. Claims in his affidavit that Rian van der Waal bought a property for me in Brooklyn as part of gratification by Siangena. Mama Bull and O'Sullivan were so determined to tarnish my image and quickly passed the false information to Peter Louis Maybeck, who wrote another article in the Afrikaner Sunday newspaper, Rapport, and its sister publication, City Press. Had they done proper investigation, they would have come across the following facts. The first one was that Rian bought 2 adjacent properties in Brooklyn and registered this in the name of his company, Precise Trade. Not Lucky Montana, Precise Trade. I had sold one of my properties in Waterkloof, and Chair, this property is one I referred to, R1242, the one that I moved into after the taxi people chased me. Chair, I had sold one of my properties in Waterkloof. The family was staying in one of the properties bought by Rian. So he bought those 2 properties. Now, this property, my property was 8.5 million rand at that time. I developed it, I doubled the size of the property. So I give this property. So we then agree that I will sell my property to this family to match the price of their own house that they were selling. Because they were in real terms, that family was not selling their house, Chair. But because if you were to do these properties, is 2 properties that have been subdivided, you will not do a development if they are not consolidated. So that family was incentivized to move from Brooklyn, to move into my property in Waterkloof. And then there was no money exchange. So my bond, I said, as long as we can cancel my bond with the bank, which was done, and the family moved that thing and the 2 properties. Now, until that stage, I didn't have any role, because we then agreed that once the properties have been consolidated into one, I will then be able to do a joint development onto that property. So it's business, Chair. I put my property with higher value, precisely because I know that the development will be very important. And I'd also rented one of the properties, Chair, for use by my aunt who was running a catering business, Chair. So that property was used there in that process. So O'Sullivan and Mama Bolo do not know those facts. They are not in Oloman's report because they are not interested in the truth. They were there to say, pursue Montana. Because after they investigated corruption at PRASA, they couldn't link me to any corruption, Chair. What did they do? They say, he's a property man. And they've damaged me, Chair. I've lost a lot of money. I've lost a lot of assets. That some of these properties, I've got the Hurlingham property, I had to abandon it, Chair. I couldn't do the development. Precisely because even the banks say, hey, we can't touch you, Montana, with all these reports that are there. I think they've succeeded in what they're trying to do, Chair. The development potential of the 2 Brooklyn properties was huge, Chair. And not only that, when you look at the Rose properties, by the way, the one owned by Miss Sally De Beer. Why were we interested in that property, Chair? Because, and she didn't say it here, the property had business rights. So you can call me a black Jew, Chair. When it comes to making money and properties, it's a thing that I do. And I will not come to the commission and apologize. If there's something that we have. So here we are fighting about inferences about these properties, Chair. Now, Chair, you can see that Parkwood, the property that was there in Parkwood, bought by Rian, it was bought after I've done a lot of work. You can see that the proceeds of the sale of that property went into Hurlingham, it went into my other Waterkloof property that I still own, to this very day, Chair. You can see, Chair, that the family that moved, it moved into my own property, Chair, precisely because the development potential was huge. Chair, I worked with Rian. Rian van der Walt is such a man of integrity. And, it saddened me to see a man who was a key person. He was playing a major role in his church. He was one of the church elders. The story about the properties had destroyed him, Chair. A great legal mind, and I know a committed South African. An Afrikaner was committed to this country. Was involved in businesses, Chair. And let me say finally, contrary to what we are being told, Chair, because the commission and Oleman, getting the story from O'Sullivan, he's saying, but Montana was involved with Rian. Never denied that, Chair. And he says, it means Rian's properties are Montana's properties. Why would I bought other properties that are registered in my name? Why would properties that are bought by Precise Trade be Montana's property? That's what they're trying to say. That's the inference that no, Rian was buying them for Montana. But Chair, I've since got information about the liquidation of Precise Trade. And to my surprise, I found that they are in fact, and I think this is very important that the commission get the liquidators of Precise Trade. because I'm told they've approached the other investors in precise trade to offer them these things. That's what the information I got. They never approached me. In public, I'm told the properties belong to me. But when they're sold, the investors, the true investors into the one that Rian worked with, and I think in Robert Nittling's affidavit, he mentioned the people who invested into precise trade. I was not even one of them, but I had a partnership with Mr. Rian van der Walt, which was public, which was known, and I was proud, Chair, if another opportunity were to arise for me to work with Mr. Rian van der Walt. Because Rian doesn't work for, you get a sense that Rian is a director of Siangena or is a lawyer, or internal lawyer. No, Chair. Rian is a person there. But what has happened is that the group that is guided not by facts but connecting the dots. They say, oh, Montana works with Van der Walt. Van der Walt has got some relationship with a law firm that works with, that did work for what is it called, TMM or Siangena. So they are the same, they're tied. It's one thing, it's a corrupt scheme. It's so false, Chair. Now, let me conclude, Chair, my submission by how did you get to this point? Because I think the Chair is very important to understand that. How did you get to this point being turned around? It starts with one Mr. Paul O'Sullivan. And in a different section of my affidavit, I deal with that at length, Chair. Immediately after I've left PRASA, in 2015, I was approached by people who wanted to help me. I later learned that these people are Paul O'Sullivan's people. They told me, Chair, that they met me at the Da Vinci Hotel in Sandton. I got a call from someone from Cape Town in the ANC who said there are people who want to help you. Who want to help you. Because already the noise has started. I said, no, I'll meet with them. I went to Sandton. So these people came, and when I arrived there, I realized there's a problem, but I met with the chaps. They told me something, and I think this was about in August, I think it should have been late July, beginning of August 2015. They said to me, Mr. Montana, we want to help you. I say, how do you want to help me? They say, we work with the Hawks. We work with the NPA. You are regarded as the leader of the biggest criminal syndicate that has defrauded the state of 3.6 billion rands. If we can peg it on the ground here, just to say these chairs, the 3.6. Do you think I'll be on this show's chair? I'll be here in South Africa. I'll probably be sitting on a yacht somewhere, isn't it? In the middle of the Mediterranean and enjoying that money. There's a 3.6 billion rands. Montana took, he used different contracts with Fambo, Siangena, and stole this money. So I said, so why don't they charge me? They said, no, we are working with them. We want to help you. So I said, how am I going to help you? They say, I must pass part of that money to them, they'll help me. I think at that time they wanted 500 million. So you can see in my face, I mean, I'm 500 million myself. Maybe that's my value. They wanted 500 million. You know what was my response, Chair? I said, I'm very happy to work with you. But can you please go, why don't you identify and tell me where this money, this loot is stashed? Those are my exact words. Show it to me. Once you guys can show it to me, you're going to get even more than what you'd asked for. They've never come back to me. Chair, I thought that was the end. Okay? They approached some of the companies that are mentioned that are said to be involved in a corrupt relationship with me. They then demanded money. And these companies called me and said, hey, man, we're being approached. I won't mention their names, Chair, because I think it would be unfair, but I don't want to put their lives at risk. So they were approached to say, pay some money. I blocked it. They say, no, O'Sullivan will solve your problems. I blocked the chair. And I told them, let me use my words. O'Sullivan must go to hell. He has intimidated a lot of people. Now, what O'Sullivan does, Chair, if you want to understand his affidavit, I have refused to pay. I said, in South Africa, I don't pay anybody. In South Africa, I never pay anybody. If the law enforcement believes that they've got a case against me, let it be put, let me go to court. Now, Chair, what has happened is that, and this modus operandi is not isolated, Chair. I know Mr. O'Sullivan has said in response to my affidavit that he's willing to cross-examine me, Chair. Like Versman, I'm more than happy, Chair. I hope he applies to cross-examine. I told him, Chair, I call him the Irish extortionist. Because what Paul O'Sullivan does in this country, he's been praised as a crime fighter and praised himself, I brought down GCEO. No. The man is at the heart of criminal activity in the country. Those of us who know, Chair, and I'm saying it because it's in my affidavit and he has been notified. What I'm saying here, he knows, Chair, and that is why I'm inviting him to cross-examine. What he does, Chair, where people, prominent South Africans are involved, are having problems with SARS or the law, Paul O'Sullivan comes in and say, I will help you. And he collects money. And let me say, Chair, I've even seen statements, financial statements, and you remember in my affidavit, I've called for this commission to subpoena the companies and the financial statements and bank statements of all companies that belong to Paul O'Sullivan. You'll actually see, Chair, that the modus operandi is very simple. If you are in trouble, Paul arrives. He's got his enforcers, and his enforcers come from Cape Town. I've come face to face with them at the Da Vinci Hotel. The Chair, they insist you must pay them, and therefore they sort out the case. They also pay on the other side at SARS. So you can't tell me about SARS. One of the most corrupt organizations that we have. Okay? And I'm still gonna, Chair, I'm saying these people because I want, Chair, for me, I want this commission to focus on what it should focus on. The real capture. And when you move beyond O'Sullivan, Chair, so they go to SARS and the police. He sent me emails and say, Montana, I think it was in 2018. Montana, I've got good news for you. You are going to be arrested before Christmas. I say, I'm happy for you, Mr. O'Sullivan. Happy New Year. I'll see you in January in 2019. So he tried to intimidate me, Chair. And I told him that he's one of the number one criminal in the country and the biggest crook. The intelligence services, our law enforcement agencies are afraid to deal with Mr. Paul O'Sullivan. And because they're afraid
I want to limit you now because we're dealing with the properties, but I wanted you to
yes, Chair, but let me
show the connection. Yeah.
Sure, Chair. The issue I'm saying is that all these lies about my properties, they come from a criminal gang that wanted to extort money from me and other people, and then they went to write. Afterwards, that's when this 22 affidavit came and accused me of all sorts of things. And that is why I want Mr. O'Sullivan, I want Wertsmans here. And you know, it's going to be very interesting, Chair, because I want to use that cross-examination to expose the real criminals. But I won't end there. I actually want to show how they link to the structure of power in our country. Okay? And Chair, I've made up my mind. I'm one of the people who are going to spearhead the fight against the power, the structure of power that actually use criminal men, including drugs money, Chair. So I'm inviting them to apply to the commission and say, want to cross-examine Montana. I'll be here to engage with them, Chair, to assist this commission to understand. That is why, Chair, let me read as my conclusion what I said in the conclusion to my statement to this commission. I think it's very important that, Chair, that I do that. I said, I thank you, Chair, in the statement, but I say here that, and I quote, Chair, the work of this commission will be incomplete without looking deeply into the activities of this network and its unlawful surveillance activity at PRASA and beyond. It has appropriated to itself key functions of the South African state. So, Chair, this commission, in my view, the property thing looked like a Lucky Montana thing, some corrupt thing. It's a big thing, Chair. And I hope that before May, Chair, when you close the work of this commission, and I know they'll chase me, Chair, because they've got the people armed and everything. But I come here, Chair, and I'm going to assist this. I'm going to tell you one thing. You asked me to come and assist this commission.
Yes.
I'm going to assist you with the real criminals, Chair. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, all right. Now, at least you got a chance to put your side of the story, and now Mr. Soni can begin the questioning.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Mr. Montana.
I don't know what your approach is going to be, Mr. Soni, but in the light of the various explanations that Mr. Montana is giving in regard to the properties, and I think some of them, the explanations affect different properties and are interwoven. It may be that it would be helpful to take one property at a time.
As you please.
And move from one to the next. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All
right. And Chairperson, placing on record, I'm only going on the properties we've investigated.
Yes. Yeah. No. Obviously, those are the only ones that you will question him on.
Now, Mr. Montana, in the first paragraph of the statement you read this morning, that's SS 18B, you say in the second sentence, in its so-called preliminary report on PRASA, the Commission's investigator, Clint Ollerman, and evidence leader, Soni, told the chairperson of the Commission that, and you quote, Montana purchased properties of over 36 million rand within a year. That's the allegation you make.
No, Chair, I'm not making an allegation. This is what you answered the Chair.
Okay, I just want to,
it's a statement of fact, Chair.
Well, let me, you didn't only say I said it, you said Mr. Ollerman said it as well.
Chair, the Chair asked for confirmation, and he asked you, Mr. Soni, and you are the one who answered to say, no, he bought properties for 36 million rands.
Mr. Montana, I don't want us to go to and fro. I didn't interrupt you. I'm going to ask you a question. I'd like you to please look at paragraph 4 of Mr. Ollerman's report, which is Bundle H, SS 18, and page 4. And I'll just read the relevant parts of that paragraph. It says, between August 2014...
I'm sorry, Mr. Soni. When I came here, this file was opened on a certain page.
Oh, sorry.
And that's not the page you are
it's
on.
a different page, yes.
Yes.
It's page 4.
We'll be using Bundle H.
Bundle H.
PRASA Bundle H. And to what page must I go?
Page 4, Chairperson.
Page 4.
Yes.
Okay.
I just want to set the record straight on something. We didn't have a debate. If there is something, it'll come up in the record.
Yes.
But this is what Mr. Ollerman says. Between August 2014 and October 2014, Mr. Montana was involved in arrangements for the purchase of 3 properties for a total of more than 36 million rand. Nowhere in his report, and you've made that allegation previously, I looked at the report over and over again. That allegation that you purchased properties of over 36 million rand within a year is not contained in this report. I'm putting that to you, Mr. Montana.
Chair, you know, sometimes you can solve. Can we play a clip? I've got a clip, Chair. You ask a question. Mr. Sony doesn't answer. He's actually dealing with a different thing. I said, the chair asked a question. And you said, how many? You even said, is it 30 million? Mr. Sony said he bought properties for 36 million rands. Now he's reading a different thing. He's not telling me about what I'm referring to. I said, what Mr. Sony said in response to you, Chair, he said actually he had even a smile that Mr. Montana bought, and I brought the clip, Chair, so that we can play it.
No,
and then we don't
fine.
have a dispute about that.
I think Mr. Sony hasn't reached the point where he is talking about what he may have said. He's simply looking at what Mr. Oleman said in his report, because the second sentence of the first paragraph of your document says, in its so-called preliminary report on PRASA, the Commission's investigator, Clint Oleman, and evidence leader Adverse Sony told the chairperson of the Commission, blah, 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 blah. So in other words, I think the understanding is that you are saying both Mr. Sony and Mr. Oleman, and in regard to Mr. Oleman, in his report, preliminary report, this is what he said. And I think that is what Mr. Sony is trying to clear up. So, and he is doing so by going to the report, because your sentence says in the preliminary report. You understand? He's
Chair.
Still going to come to the question of what he may have said as opposed to Mr. Oleman, I think.
Yes, Chair, but I was referring to specifically what he had said to you.
Yeah.
And Mr. Oleman was in full agreement. He was nodding, Chair. That is why I say that, you recall initially I said the Commission owes me an apology earlier on. So, Chair, I'm referring to that. And Mr. Sony, let's separate the issues. I see the paragraph that is written there, but I'm saying that you inquired from them. They confirmed to you. They didn't even give this content. They said, and it was even like a joke. No, he bought properties for 36 million rand with him. So that was a statement, Chair.
But the question, I think, is, let me put it this way. Is your statement in the first paragraph of the document that Mr. Oleman said in the preliminary report that you purchased properties of over 36 million rand within a year correct? Is your statement correct insofar as it refers to him?
Yeah, Chair.
And the report?
Yes, Chair. He's saying in the report in paragraph 4 that the judgment, he says, this is different, Chair. Mr. Montana was involved in arrangements for the purchase of 3 properties for a total of more than 36 million. Correct. What I'm referring
Within
to.
a year?
No, Chair, it doesn't say within a year.
Yes.
What I'm referring to is what they were saying. They were not saying, I'm involved in arrangement for properties of 36 million. Is that I bought properties for 36 million, Chair. And that is factually incorrect.
Yes,
That's what I'm challenging, Chair.
But I think Mr. Sony wants you to make it clear whether you are sticking to the statement in terms of which you attribute to Mr. Oleman's report, preliminary report, the statement that you purchased properties of over 36 million rand within a year. Whether you stick to that or you say...
No, Chair, I stick to that. That is why I'm...
That's
sorry,
different.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry for interrupting you.
Yes, no. So I'm saying, I think he wants to see whether you're sticking to that or whether you accept that that doesn't accurately reflect what was said in the report, and then take it from there.
No, Chair. I think my statement in my, the one that I've submitted as part of my affidavit, is actually a correct statement, Chair.
But remember, we're looking at this one that you have, at least I have seen, that's the one you read into the record.
No, I see it, Chair. But I'm saying that we seem to be confusing issues here.
Yeah.
Let me clarify it. I didn't say Mr. Oleman in his statement. I mentioned the report. I'm saying, Chair, that in its so-called preliminary report on PRASA, the Commission's investigator, Oleman, and evidence leader, Advocate Bassey, told the chairperson, okay? And I've clarified, Chair, that during the testimony, you ask a specific question, Chair. And that response is not consistent, it contradicts number 4. You see, number 4 says, Chair, I was involved in arrangements for the purchase of 3 properties. That I accept is correct, Chair. Now, the statement that was given to you, Chair, was that I, Tepo Laki Montana, bought properties for 36 million. You know, throughout I've explained, Chair, in my statement that
Yes.
I've worked with people. You can say you were involved in when that property was bought. Chair, I will admit that. But if you say Montana bought properties for 36 million, I didn't buy properties for 36 million. Chair.
But hang on, Mr. Montana, in order for us to make progress, this is important. Is my understanding of the second sentence of paragraph 1 of the document you have read into the record incorrect? Namely that it says, among other things, Mr. Oleman said in his preliminary report on PRASA that you purchased properties of over 36 million rand within a year. Is my understanding of that sentence correct, at least in part?
Are you reading mine or Oleman's statement, Chair?
I'm
looking at
reading
2
yours,
statements.
no, your document.
My document.
The first paragraph, the second sentence.
Yes.
Yeah.
Chair, my statement there is correct. I'm sticking to
Yes.
that statement, yes.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
Okay, now I think what Mr. Soni is going to say is, can you help us, show us where in the preliminary report Mr. Oleman said what is written in that sentence?
No, Chair. I think it shouldn't be me.
Yeah.
The evidence leader is supposed, when we were discussing that, the question you asked was the properties I bought. You see, I'm saying number 4 is correct, Chair. Mark it. I agree with it.
Yeah.
I was involved in even more properties
Yes.
than this. I
Yes.
don't have a problem with that.
Yes.
But when you ask the question, Chair, okay, they even move beyond that statement. So this statement was changed. So in writing, they say this, but to you, Chair, there was a massive misrepresentation.
But
Firstly, Montana bought properties for 36 million. Secondly, he didn't have the money to buy those properties. This is what both of them said in the testimony.
But remember, now, I don't know whether the question that you say I asked while Mr. Oleman was giving evidence.
Yes,
is that
Chair.
correct? Did he say the same thing as well? Because I don't know whether I was asking him or asking Mr. Soni on that issue when that response was given.
You were asking Mr. Oleman.
Yeah.
Mr. Soni answered on his behalf. He came in to clarify. He nodded, he agreed, Chair, and that is why, Chair, so that
Yes.
we can close this thing.
No, but that's fine. So that was not in his written report. That was in his oral evidence.
Yes, no, Chair. During that, I think it was you asked in the course of him presenting his report.
Yeah.
That's what I'm referring to, Chair.
Yes.
Yes.
In other words, you accept, do you not, that if one goes to his written report, one will not find that a sentence to that effect.
No, Chair, I agree, except that we know that we'll take this and we'll also take the transcript, isn't it?
No. The
Yes.
transcript
Yes.
is a different matter. If you say, look, I'm not saying he said it in the report, in the written report, but he said it in his oral evidence, and that would be in the transcript, that can be checked if necessary.
Chair, I'm happy with number 4.
Yes.
Because it's saying Montana was involved with people, that's fine.
Yeah.
But that is different from saying
Yeah.
Montana bought properties for this amount of money. That I reject, Chair.
Yes.
And that is why I wanted to read my statement in the beginning.
Yes.
So that you can see that these are not one and the same thing.
I think where we are, and I'm saying this so that you can tell me if I've misunderstood you. I think where we are with regard to Mr. Soni's question is this. One, you accept that in the written preliminary report, Mr. Oleman did not say that you purchased properties of over 36 million rand within a year. But you are saying that in his oral evidence, he did say that. Is my understanding correct?
No, Chair. No. I think number 4.
Yeah.
I'm happy, that's what he's saying.
Yes.
When we go, it's just I didn't mark it, Chair.
Yeah.
As we have the discussion in the course of the, I'll draw
Yeah.
it to your attention.
Yeah.
Where he actually even move away from 4.
Yeah.
And I think that could even
And
help.
says what you are saying.
And saying what I'm saying, Chair. And when you ask, Chair, because you wanted clarity,
Yes.
they then, both of them confirmed, Chair. And that is why I'm saying, probably Mr. Soni will look at the clip at that time. The team can help him get that clip and ask your question. You'll see, Chair, they're saying, I bought properties, and I've taken exception to that, Chair.
No, that's fine. But as you answer the questions, just bear in mind or try to make a distinction whether it's something that was in a written document, such as the report, or it's something that was said during oral evidence. Because I think part of Mr. Soni's question was to say, here you talk about the written report. Okay, but you have said that there is somewhere in the written report where he says what
Yes,
you say.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, Mr. Soni.
Okay. Mr. Montana, you're going to come back sometime. I'm going to challenge you now, and I'm challenging you publicly and officially. I want you to show the chairperson on a different occasion when you come back where that is contained in his report.
I'll do that, Chair. I'm more than happy to do that. I'm glad that we're going to be robust today and deal with this issue, Chair. I'm happy.
Okay.
Now, Mr. Montana, I want to also say this to you. The purpose of asking you questions about these matters is to give you an opportunity to respond to allegations that are contained in documents and so on. Now, you either meet those allegations head on or you avoid them. If you refuse to meet them head on, at the end, I will argue to the chairperson that those allegations stand unanswered because you have not met them head on. I'm only making you aware of the approach I am going to adopt.
Chair, can I object to that very strongly?
Let him finish first. Finish. Are you done, Mr. Soni?
Yes.
Okay.
Chair, can I object to that? You know, Mr. Soni has told me about the report that is bringing to you. I'm not here for that, Chair. Mr. Soni can write whatever he wants to write and present to you. The Chair will apply his mind. Mr. Soni, write whatever you want to write. I'm not here to convince the Commission to take my version. I'm here to assist the Commission and present evidence. Chair, Mr. Soni was wrong. Okay? Let me talk about your role, Mr. Soni. Is to assist the Commission to reach the truth, to find the truth. Is not to pursue or to push a particular view. Chair, in that particular instance, and that is why I've kept over 20, Chair, of the clips where Mr. Soni was talking to Mr. Oleman here, when he was leading them in the evidence. And Mr. Soni forgets he still has to lead my evidence here. Okay, it's going to be very interesting. Chair, you must also see those clips and say, let's go back. Mr. Soni was not facilitating for Mr. Oleman to tell his story. He was making an assertions, his own assertions. Okay? There are so many. So, Chair, you have invited me here. And let me put it very clear, because I'm not one person who comes and want to please the chair so that a favorable, I'm not asking you for a favorable report. I've just read my statement. And my statement proves beyond any reasonable doubt. Okay, Chair? He's going to ask me that the story presented to this commission that I bought properties, I didn't have money, some people, but it's so false. It's not backed up by evidence. I've given, and I hope he's going to ask me, Chair, about the breakdown that I've given to him about, because you see, he wanted to deal with 4 properties. Yet he knows that the other properties I've sold were actually the basis of my involvement or possible partnerships in these other 4 properties. He wants to restrict you there. That is why I insisted on coming so that, Chair, you understand the context. So Mr. Soni cannot threaten me, Chair. I can never be threatened. I'm one person who can never be threatened. So Mr. Soni can write, I mean, even where I proved previously in my other testimony, where he said things you could see on the evidence of Matangoye and the things, I'm going to write, Mr. Soni, let me face you, not face the chair.
You must face the chair.
No, but I want to say it in his face, Chair.
No, face me.
Chair.
But let me finish.
My last
and I
sentence,
want to say something,
Chair, you know, when I wrote to you in 2019, July 2016, I said in my letter, I want to assist, before it became fashionable, I want to assist the commission in its work, and I want to demonstrate that those who make allegations of corruption against some of us are in fact the most corrupt, they're involved in wrongdoing. I believe this commission is very important for the future of our country. So if Mr. Soni, as he has shown, demonstrated throughout, that he serves a particular view, a particular narrative, and he threatens me, he's going to let him write, Chair, because ultimately these things will be tested in court, will be contested. I'm not here, Chair, to buy the chair's face. I'm here to assist that is why I've been fighting to come here. So for me to be told that I'm going to write this thing, so he's going to, Chair, why don't we stop this session? Because what he's saying is that despite the fact that I told him that I put 2 million there, 2 million there, I got this facility from the bank, he's saying I'm still going to write so that I get, so we are going to fight today, Chair. I'm ready for this fight. I'm ready for this fight, but I'm still going to assist you, Chair.
Let me explain why he was saying what he was saying, Mr. Montana. You know, a commission, you know, certain things in a commission happen in the same way they happen in a court of law, whether it's a criminal case or civil case. But of course there are certain differences. But also, I'm a judge, he's a lawyer. Most of the time we spend our lives in courts. And that's where we spend most of our working lives. Now, one of the rules of fairness that I think I would rather call it that, rules of fairness in a court of law is that if you are questioning a witness and you later on argue in a certain way, if you didn't do certain things and you didn't explain certain things to the witness, you might be held to have been unfair to the witness. So to avoid being said to be unfair, you want to explain those things. So I think what Mr. Soni is doing, he is saying, I will be asking you questions. I advise you to deal with them head on. But if you don't deal head on with certain allegations, I may have to argue later on to the chairperson that you were avoiding them or something like that.
Sure.
But what he is doing, he wants to make sure that if you decide not to deal head on with certain allegations, you must know that there might be this risk, so that it can't be a situation where he is seen maybe to take advantage of the fact that you might not have known that, you might have explained some things in a certain way. And this is particularly more important when you are not legally represented, because sometimes when you are legally represented, one can assume that your lawyer would have explained certain things and so on. So that's the context. So robustness is not a problem and so on, but I think that's the context in which he was asking.
No, Chair, I accept that.
Yeah.
Chair, I've made a commitment.
Yes, yeah.
You see, I didn't pay Polo Sullivan, Chair,
Yeah,
because I'm not that kind of a person.
yeah.
I'm here. Mr. Soni can tear me apart,
Yeah,
and he must accept my response.
yeah.
But Chair, I'm making very clear, I can't be threatened.
Yes.
I'm not one person to be threatened.
I don't think he's threatening you. I think that's
Yeah.
just what he was, that's the context of what he was saying. I see we are at 5-2. Yeah.
Chairperson,
Yeah.
before we adjourn, you've perhaps put it more eloquently as to what my duty is to Mr.
Yes.
Montana.
Yes. Yeah.
It was never meant as a threat. You would not allow me to
Yeah,
threaten
no,
a witness,
Yeah.
and I would not threaten a witness. But at the end of the day, Chairperson, we have a limited time available. And if, for example, and I mean, that's all I was trying to do, is to say to Mr. Montana, I'm going to refer you to certain documents. And you must explain what those documents mean to you, and I will tell you what I believe they mean. And that's the whole purpose of this.
Yeah.
And to the extent Mr. Montana thinks I've already made up my mind, I would not ask Mr. Montana questions if I'd already made up my mind. Because the idea is to get his version so that you can look at it. It's not me who's going to look at it, Chairperson, it's you.
Yeah, maybe also to just mention, to add to this, Ms. Montana. You see, the best way to prejudice you, if an evidence leader wanted to prejudice you, would be not to explain what Mr. Soni has explained to you, and ask questions, and then you don't deal with allegations head on. He moves on, next question, next question, next question. Then we are done, then you go. Then when he presents argument, he says, you see, he was not answering questions. He was avoiding. I asked him questions. He was telling me other stories and so on. But when he explains it like this, you are able to say, okay, I'm going to be alive to whatever allegation, and I'm going to make sure that I don't have a situation where I leave it without answering it head on. So I think let's adjourn on that basis, and then let's take lunch, and then we'll come back at 2 o'clock.
Chair, I accept your guidance on this issue. My point has been made.
Yes. Yeah.
I'll come back after lunch to
Yes.
come and answer this question, Chair. Thank you.
No, that's fine.
Thank you.
We adjourn.
As you please.